I had built a $3 billion empire, a monument to my ambition. But in one single, arrogant moment, it was all locked away by a mysterious woman and the handshake I refused. The number on the screen wasn't just a number. It was a monument. $3 billion. 3 followed by 9 perfect, beautiful zeros. It represented 5 years of my life, of sleepless nights, of sacrificed relationships, of living on black coffee and the raw adrenaline of the deal. I had built the Elysium Fund from nothing, convincing skeptical old money tycoons and audacious new tech billionaires that my vision was the future. And now, the final tranche of capital had cleared. The fund was live. I was, for all intents and purposes, the king of a small, obscenely wealthy nation. The boardroom on the 54th floor was a glass box in the sky, overlooking the sprawling city below. The mood was electric. My team was buzzing, shaking hands with the bank's top brass, their faces flushed with victory. Champagne flutes clinked. I stood slightly apart, soaking it in. I felt invincible, like a modern-day Midas. Everything I touched had just turned to gold, and this was only the beginning. Just one final piece of housekeeping, Alex, Marcus, the bank's senior VP, said, clapping me on the shoulder. His smile was as wide and polished as his shoes. The head of global compliance needs to physically sign off on the asset release. Purely a formality, of course. Everything's in order. I gave a magnanimous nod. Formalities, procedures, the little hurdles the mortals of the world put in place. I was already miles beyond them, my mind charting the first $100 million acquisition. Marcus gestured towards a woman who had been standing quietly by the door, almost blending into the polished mahogany wall. I hadn't even noticed her. She was gray. Gray suit, graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, a face that was utterly devoid of expression. She held a tablet in one hand and a stylus in the other, a digital age Cerberus guarding the gates of my wealth. "Alex, this is Evelyn Reed," Marcus said, his voice booming with forced cheerfulness. "Evelyn, this is the man of the hour, Alex Sterling." My team and the other bankers respectfully parted ways to let her through. She walked towards me, her steps measured and silent. There was an unnerving stillness about her, a stark contrast to the jubilant chaos in the room. She looked me up and down, not with admiration or deference, but with the cool, detached appraisal of a biologist examining a specimen. "Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was flat, low, and carried an unexpected weight. A momentous achievement. "Thank you," I said, my tone a little too dismissive. I was the star here, she was the stagehand. I just wanted her to sign the digital dotted line so I could get to the real celebration. She tapped a few times on her tablet. A green check mark appeared next to a long line of text I couldn't be bothered to read. "All digital signatures are confirmed. All financial stress tests have been passed." She looked up from the screen, her eyes locking onto mine. Just one final step, the personal verification. She extended a small, pale hand. I stared at it. It was a simple, common gesture, a handshake, the cornerstone of business etiquette, the seal on a deal. But in that moment, floating on my cloud of triumph and arrogance, I saw it differently. I'm a bit of a germaphobe, a quirk I usually manage, but today I was above managing anything. I was the architect of a $3 billion empire. I didn't need to press the flesh with a compliance clerk. The deal was done. The money was mine. This was a pointless, archaic ritual. A faint, self-satisfied smirk touched my lips. I gave her a curt nod instead, a gesture one might give to a valet or a doorman. "We're good," I said, my voice slick with confidence. I turned to Marcus, ready to raise a glass. "Now, about that champagne." The sudden silence in the room was deafening. The clinking of glasses stopped. The celebratory chatter died in an instant. I turned back and saw every eye in the room fixed on us. Marcus's polished smile had vanished, replaced by a look of sheer horror. Evelyn Reed stood perfectly still, her hand still suspended in the air between us. She held it there for a long, excruciating 3 seconds before slowly, deliberately retracting it. She didn't look angry. She didn't look offended. She looked nothing. Her face was a perfect, blank slate. "I see," she whispered, the words barely audible, yet they cut through the silence like a shard of ice. She looked down at her tablet. Her thumb moved with calm precision across the screen. She swiped once, then tapped twice. A soft chime echoed from the device. At the exact same moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, annoyed at the interruption. It was a notification from the bank's secure portal, the very one that had confirmed the fund's activation just minutes earlier. I opened it. 2 words burned in stark, red letters on the screen, surrounded by a dozen security warnings. Access denied. My blood ran cold. I looked up from my phone, my eyes wide with disbelief, and met Evelyn's gaze. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile finally touched the corner of her lips as she spoke, her quiet voice filling the vast, silent boardroom. Clause 117B of the Capital Holding Agreement, Mr. Sterling, the Character and Integrity provision. It states that the fund manager must be deemed of sound and cooperative character by the designated compliance officer for the final release. She held up her tablet, showing me a screen filled with legal text, a single paragraph highlighted in red. "You just failed the final assessment." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, my brain refused to process them. It felt like a glitch in the matrix, a software bug in the fabric of reality. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, a sound I hadn't noticed a minute ago. My team stared, mouths agape. Marcus looked like he was about to have a stroke, his face turning a blotchy, alarming shade of red. I finally found my voice, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle and hollow even to my own ears. "Okay, very funny," I said, waving a dismissive hand. "Is this some kind of bizarre corporate hazing ritual? You got me. Now, Evelyn, if you'll just tap your little magic wand again and let's get on with it." Evelyn Reed didn't even blink. She slipped her tablet into a sleek gray portfolio case, snapped it shut, and gave a slight, formal bow of her head. "My work here is concluded, Marcus. You'll receive the full report within the hour." And with that, she turned and walked out of the boardroom. Her exit was as quiet and unassuming as her entrance, but she left behind a crater of pure pandemonium. As soon as the door clicked shut, the room exploded. "What the hell was that?" I roared, rounding on Marcus. "What is that provision? I've never heard of it. My lawyers vetted every line of that agreement. It's deep boilerplate, Alex, standard in sovereign and trust-level holding agreements," Marcus stammered, wiping sweat from his brow with a silk handkerchief. "It's a fail-safe. It's never, ever been invoked, not in my 30 years in this business." "Then uninvoke it," I shouted, my voice echoing in the suddenly cavernous room. "Call your boss, call the board, call God himself if you have to, but you will release my money." An hour later, I was in a smaller, soundproofed conference room with my top 3 lawyers and a ghost white Marcus. The champagne was gone, replaced by untouched bottles of mineral water. My phone was a dead weight on the table. No amount of refreshing the banking portal changed the blood-red "Access Denied" banner. It was a digital wall, and it was impenetrable. My lead counsel, a shark named Peterson, who charged $2,000 an hour, looked grim. "He's right, Alex. The clause is real, and it's ironclad. It grants final discretionary power to the designated global compliance officer. There is no specified appeals process." "What do you mean, no appeals process?" I snarled. This is America. We sue. We can try, Peterson said, his voice low. But the fund is domiciled through a series of international trusts. The jurisdiction is deliberately opaque. A legal challenge could take years, and the bank's position, however absurd it sounds, is contractually sound. Her decision is binding. I slammed my fist on the table, the impact rattling the water bottles. This isn't about the contract. This is about a handshake. A handshake. She's nuked a $3 billion fund over a goddamn handshake. It's not about the handshake, Alex, Marcus said, finally finding his nerve. His voice was trembling. It's about who you refuse to shake hands with. Evelyn Reed isn't just a compliance drone. They call her the gatekeeper. She's the final signatory on every transaction over 10 figures that this bank processes. She's personally vetted the release of funds to nations, to multinational corporations, to sheikhs and oligarchs. She's a legend, an urban myth in the world of finance. No one knows much about her, but they know she has absolute authority. She is the final assessment. The words hit me like a physical blow. This mousy gray woman wasn't a clerk. She was a queen, sitting on a throne I hadn't even known existed. The arrogance drained out of me, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. I had been celebrating my coronation while standing on a trapdoor, and I had just insulted the person holding the lever. Fine, I said, my voice now a low, dangerous growl. Where is she? Her office wasn't on the executive floor. It was 2 levels below ground, in a secure basement area I didn't know existed. There was no name on the door, just a number. I didn't knock. I barged in. The office was small, Spartan, and meticulously organized. Not a single paper was out of place. The only personal item was a small, thriving orchid on the corner of her desk. She was sitting there, typing on a standard issue keyboard, not looking remotely surprised to see me. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her eyes not leaving her monitor. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's been a misunderstanding." "No," she replied calmly. "There has been a clarification." "Listen," I said, stepping closer. I tried a different tact, humility. I was arrogant. I was out of line. I apologize. It was a lapse in judgment. Now please, reverse this. She finally stopped typing and swiveled her chair to face me. Her eyes were like chips of granite. "The assessment of your character was not based on a single moment, Mr. Sterling. It was the culmination of an extensive observation period. The lapse in judgment was merely the data point that completed the profile. The decision is final." Desperation clawed at my throat. "I'll double the bank's management fees, triple them. I'll give you a personal bonus. Name your price. $10 million, 20. Just tap your screen and this all goes away." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed her face. It wasn't greed. It was something closer to pity. "You still don't understand," she said softly. "You think money is the answer to everything because it has always been your answer. But the character and integrity provision exists for one reason: to protect the fund from its greatest liability. And in this case, Mr. Sterling, the greatest liability is you." She swiveled back to her monitor, the dismissal more absolute than any security guard throwing me out could ever be. I stood there, shaking with a rage so profound it felt like it would tear me apart. I was Alex Sterling. I didn't lose. I didn't get shut down by a basement-dwelling bureaucrat. I walked out of her office, my mind racing. If I couldn't go through the wall, I'll dig under it. Everyone has a weakness. Everyone has a secret. Everyone has a price. She just hit hers better than most. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I kept for emergencies. It was for a man named Costello, a private investigator who specialized in finding things people didn't want found. "Costello," I barked into the phone, "I have a job for you. A woman, Evelyn Reed, works at my bank.
I want to know everything. Every school she went to, every person she ever dated, every late payment on a credit card, every skeleton in every closet she's ever owned. I want leverage, and I want it yesterday. On it, he said, his voice raspy. I'll start digging. I hung up, a grim satisfaction settling over me. The game wasn't over. It had just changed. 3 hours later, my phone rang again. It was Costello. That was fast, even for him. Well, I demanded, what did you find?
There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For the first time I could remember, Costello sounded rattled. I don't know how to tell you this, Alex, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I've run her name through every database I have. Global, domestic, financial, criminal. It's clean. Too clean. What does that mean? I snapped. It means that according to every official record, every digital footprint, every scrap of data that exists, Costello said, his voice strained with disbelief, Evelyn Reed was born on the same day the Elysium Fund was legally incorporated, 5 years ago. The silence on the line stretched, filled only by the staticky hum of the city and the frantic thumping of my own heart. That's impossible, I managed to say, the words feeling foreign and clumsy in my mouth. That's a glitch, a data error. Dig deeper. Alex, you don't understand. Costello's voice was tight with an anxiety I'd never heard from him before. He was a man who trafficked in the darkest secrets of the world's most powerful people. He wasn't easily spooked. There is no deeper. She has a social security number issued 5 years ago, a driver's license issued 5 years ago, a single bank account with a modest salary from the bank automatically deposited opened 5 years ago. Before that, nothing. It's like she was created out of thin air on the exact day your fund was chartered. There's no birth certificate, no school records, no family, no history. She's a ghost. A cold dread, colder and more profound than the fear of losing my money, began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just a powerful bureaucrat. This was something else entirely. Who was Evelyn Reed? Or more terrifyingly, what was she? Keep digging, I ordered, my voice a harsh whisper. Find something, anything. I hung up before he could argue. The next few days were a special kind of hell. I was trapped in a gilded cage. My team looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. The investors, initially patient, were now calling every hour, their polite inquiries turning into thinly veiled threats. The $3 billion was in a state of suspended animation. It hadn't been returned to the investors, but it was completely inaccessible to me. It was my money, my empire, and it was locked behind a digital door held shut by a ghost. I became obsessed. I spent hours staring at the single, grainy photo Costello had managed to get of Evelyn leaving the bank. The same gray suit, the same severe bun, the same expressionless face. I started seeing her everywhere. In the reflection of a shop window, in the face of a stranger on the subway. The gray woman with no past. My lawyers were useless. They filed motions and injunctions that were swatted away by the bank's legal team with chilling efficiency. Every legal door slammed shut. The contract was a fortress, and Evelyn Reed was its unbreachable gatekeeper. I knew I couldn't win this fight with lawyers or money. This was something else. I had to get inside her head. I had to understand what made her tick. Her office was a dead end, a sterile box. But Costello had found one other location tied to her, her apartment. A modest, pre-war building on the Upper West Side. It was the only other data point in her 5-year existence. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I had to go. Under the cloak of a rainy Tuesday night, I found myself standing across the street from the building, a black baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. It was an old, elegant building, the kind with a doorman and wrought iron gates. Breaking in was out of the question. I just watched, for hours. Lights flicked on and off in different windows. People came and went.
But the light on the fourth floor, in the apartment Costello had identified as hers, remained dark. Had she gone? Did she even live there? Was it just another part of the phantom identity? Around 11 p.m., just as I was about to give up, a taxi pulled up. The back door opened and she stepped out, Evelyn Reed. She was holding a simple black umbrella against the drizzle. She paid the driver, and for a fleeting moment, under the warm glow of a street lamp, she looked different. The severity of her work persona was gone. Her hair was down, falling in soft gray waves around her shoulders. She wasn't wearing the suit, but a simple dress. She looked normal, almost gentle. She walked towards the entrance, and my heart hammered against my ribs. This was my chance. I didn't know what I was going to do. Plead, threaten, demand, but I had to confront her away from the sterile confines of the bank. I started across the street, my steps quickening. But then someone else stepped out of the shadows of the building's awning. A young man, maybe early 20s, with a bright, easy smile. He took the umbrella from her, holding it over both of them. He said something, and she laughed. It was a soft, genuine sound that seemed utterly alien coming from her. He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. She smiled back, a warm, unguarded expression that completely transformed her face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated love. I froze in the middle of the street, a car horn blaring as it swerved around me. Who was he? Costello said she had no family, no connections. Was this the secret, the leverage I was looking for? They went inside together. I waited, my mind reeling. An hour passed, then two. The light in her apartment window, the one that had been dark all night, finally flickered on. I could see their silhouettes moving behind the drawn curtains. My obsession had narrowed to a single point. I had to know who he was. I took out my phone and called Costello. "She's not alone," I said, my voice low and urgent. "There's a man with her, young. Find out who he is, now." Costello, ever the professional, didn't ask questions. He must have tapped into traffic cams or facial recognition databases, because 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a file containing a single picture of the young man, pulled from a university website, and a name, Daniel Reed. And below the name, a single line of text that made the world tilt on its axis. Subject is listed in all official records as Evelyn Reed's son. Date of birth, 22 years ago. My phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers and clattered onto the wet pavement. It wasn't possible. Costello had said she had no history beyond 5 years. A 22-year-old son couldn't exist if his mother had only existed for 5. It was a paradox, a flat-out impossibility.
Then my phone buzzed again. It was another message from Costello, sent seconds after the first. It contained a single, terrifying attachment. It was a medical file, Daniel Reed's medical file. I opened it, my hands shaking. My eyes scanned past the medical jargon, the doctor's notes, the lab results, until they landed on a single line. Diagnosis: end-stage congenital heart failure. Prognosis without transplant: 6 months. Underneath that was a second line, a recommendation from his cardiology team. Patient is a prime candidate for a full cardiac replacement using the groundbreaking new biosynthetic artificial heart, currently awaiting final FDA approval. Manufacturer: Sterling Medical. Sterling Medical. My first major acquisition. The company whose revolutionary technology was the cornerstone of the Elysium Fund's entire investment strategy. The company I owned. I stared at the screen, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. This was never about a handshake. This was never about my character. I looked up at the warm light in her 4th-floor window, and I finally understood. This was a hostage negotiation, and she wasn't demanding my money. She was demanding his life. The city's ambient noise faded to a dull roar in my ears.
The rain, the car horns, the distant sirens, it all dissolved. There was only the cold, hard screen in my hand and the warm yellow light in her window. Sterling Medical. My technology. Her son. The pieces didn't just click into place. They fused together with the force of a tectonic collision, reshaping the entire landscape of my reality. The $3 billion wasn't a prize she was withholding. It was a weapon she was aiming right at my heart. My initial reaction was a surge of triumphant rage. This was it, the leverage. She had a weakness, a glaring exposed flank. I could crush her. I could go to the board, to the press, expose her for the most flagrant conflict of interest in financial history. Compliance officer blocks fund to extort CEO for son's experimental surgery. The headlines would write themselves. I would be vindicated. I would be the victim. I would get my money. I started walking, my strides long and purposeful, fueled by this righteous fury. I would go up there, knock on her door, and lay down my terms. But as I reached the ornate iron gates of her building, I stopped. My reflection in the rain-slicked glass was a stranger, a grim, hollow-eyed man. I thought of the look on her face when she had smiled at her son. It wasn't the face of a corporate schemer. It was the face of a mother, a desperate, terrified mother. I thought about the last 5 years. Building the Elysium Fund, I had seen people as assets, liabilities, or obstacles. I had traded in companies, in futures, in algorithms, but I had never traded in a human life. And that's what this was. She had put her son's life on the table. If I exposed her, she would be ruined, fired, probably prosecuted. The bank would distance itself, the experimental treatment program would be mired in scandal, and Daniel Reed would die waiting. She knew that, and she had done it anyway. She had gambled everything, her entire phantom existence, on the chance that I was something more than the arrogant monster she'd met in that boardroom. The character and integrity provision. She wasn't assessing me for the bank. She was assessing me for her son. My anger evaporated, replaced by a heavy, unfamiliar weight in my chest. For the first time in years, the world wasn't a spreadsheet of numbers and returns. It was a story of a woman who had built a life out of nothing to save her child, and a man who had built an empire but had forgotten how to be human. I turned away from the building and walked back into the rain. I didn't go home. I went to my office. The glass box in the sky was dark and silent, a mausoleum for a victory that had never happened. I sat down at the head of the long boardroom table where it had all gone wrong. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the dark, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, and I made a different kind of calculation. The next morning, I didn't call my lawyers. I didn't call the board. I called Dr. Eris Thorne, the head of Sterling Medical. He was a brilliant, cantankerous genius I had poached from a rival company. "Thorne," I said, my voice steady, "that biosynthetic heart, how close are you to a viable human transplant?" "We're in the final simulation phase, Alex," he grumbled. "FDA approval is 6, maybe 8 months out. We need more capital to expedite the human trials, the capital you were supposed to be providing." The accusation was clear in his voice. "You have a candidate," I said, cutting him off. "Daniel Reed. His file is being sent to your secure server now. I want you to prep him. I'm waiving all costs, and I'm personally underwriting the entire procedure. You have a green light. Expedite everything, whatever it takes." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Alex, that's highly irregular. We can't just bypass the FDA. The legal exposure, the risk to the company." "The company is me, Aris," I said softly, "and I'm accepting the risk. Save the boy." I hung up. Then I made one more call, to Marcus at the bank. Set up a meeting with Evelyn Reed, her office, now. When I walked into her basement office an hour later, she was standing by the window, though there was nothing to see but a concrete wall. She turned to face me, her expression as unreadable as ever, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice flat, "have you come to threaten me?" "No," I said. I stopped a few feet from her desk. "I came to tell you that Dr. Thorne will be contacting you this morning to schedule Daniel for pre-op consultations. Sterling Medical is covering everything." The mask shattered. For a split second, her face crumpled with a relief so profound it was heartbreaking. Tears welded in her eyes, but she fought them back, her composure snapping back into place like a shield. "Why?" she whispered, the single word thick with suspicion and disbelief. "Because the character and integrity provision works both ways," I said. "You were assessing my character, and you were right. I failed. The man you met in that boardroom, he didn't deserve to manage a corner store, let alone $3 billion. He deserved to lose everything." I took a deep breath. "But he's not the man standing here today." She stared at me, her mind clearly racing, searching for the angle, the trap. "There are no strings, Evelyn. I'm not doing this to get my money." I slid a single sheet of paper across her desk. It was my official, notarized letter of resignation as manager of the Elysium Fund. "I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. My fund will be dissolved. The money will be returned to the investors. It's over." She looked from the letter back to my face, and for the first time, I saw her. Not the gatekeeper, not the ghost in the machine, but a woman who had been to hell and back. "The fund doesn't have to be dissolved," she said quietly. She picked up her tablet from the desk, her fingers tapping the screen. "The negative assessment can be amended, based on new data." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The red "Access Denied" banner was gone. In its place was the familiar, beautiful interface, displaying the number 3 followed by 9 perfect zeros. I looked at her, confused. "I don't understand." "You do now," she said, a small, genuine smile finally reaching her lips. "That was the final assessment, Mr. Sterling. Welcome to the fund." And as I stood there, looking at the monument on my screen, I realized the number no longer represented just money. It represented the price of a life, the cost of a soul, and the unexpected, immeasurable return on a single act of humanity. I finally extended my hand. This time, she took it.